30-second soundbite here to just take a second to acknowledge and recognize how challenging the times are right now, both with COVID and with all of the pain and suffering that's going on in the world right now, especially in this country and Minnesota and other states around the country. And, our hearts go out to all of the people of color who are experiencing so much pain and suffering. And we pray that this pain and this time, this suffering passes quickly. And our hearts and love is there for everyone as we struggle to try to figure out what our roles are and how do we get involved. So just wanted to say that. And moving on to happy June 1st, and moving on to the topic of in-laws.
Can I say something about
Please.
what's going on?
Sure.
So I think it's, as Joe was saying, it's terrible, and there's just a lot of stuff to be upset about. But I think we're upset because we care. And a lot of times what happens is we get stuck in the upsetness. And just like we're talking about in all of these things, when we're stuck in the upsetness, we're stuck in the muck. And really, I think the purpose of life is to let our upsetness dictate and point us to what we care about. And from that place, we can take action. Even though we feel like we are and bad things are still happening, we just stay focused on what we care about, then that's when change happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what's going on is really important, even though it seems to be, activating a lot of concern. So anyhow.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about in-laws today. This is a big topic, and it's hard to narrow it down to 45 minutes. I went online. I always go online, and there's, millions of links to Google on in-laws, and it's been the joke of, it's been the brunt of millions of jokes and stand-up comics, and it's just so loaded, and particularly mother-in-laws. So we want to try to take a stab at talking about it tonight, and really kind of, as always, welcome your involvement. We do want to hear your questions. We are happy to just break from what we're doing and engage with any of you. You can type it in the chat box, or you can just, and Sarah can read your question, or if you want to come on and engage with us, that's even better. If you do, you'll get a book, one of our Mindful Couple books that Debbie and I wrote. So we're gonna start off. Whoa, I'm good at starting fires.
Okay, this is really kind of dangerous.
So we're going to talk a little bit about starting with an introduction about in-laws. Do you want me to start with you, just kind of dialoguing about it?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do today is just have it more of a conversation between Craig and I. But I just want to reiterate what Craig was saying. It's so rich. Like if you're sitting on a question or a particular concern, we would really, really love to get you on, because I think that that conversation is more informative. And chances are, if you're experiencing a problem or have a question, it applies to somebody. Maybe not live here, but certainly when people listen to the recordings.
Yeah.
So yeah, feel free to jump in. But we're just going to start with a conversation.
So
we can talk about it.
Well, from my perspective,
Yes.
there's a couple of angles to approach this in. Okay. One of them is the concept, and Joe will appreciate this, the rich concept of honoring thy mother and thy father. Okay. And so in-laws, of course, are parents, right? Mother-in-law, father-in-law, right? So from that perspective, with a child, right? And the Judeo-Christian concept of honoring thy mother and father is so intrinsic in our culture and in what we believe. So I wanted to sort of approach that concept with you, because it seems to me that it's kind of a dilemma to some degree. And the dilemma is that if I'm the child and you're the parent, then I'm always going to be the child. And you're always going to be the parent. And any of you who go back far enough to remember transactional analysis know that there's
Parent,
this
child, adult.
parent, child, adult, that when you're acting from the child to the parent, it's kind of as you become a mature adult, a bit of a dysfunction, because I want to talk to my parents like I'm an adult. And I want to be able to rise to that occasion. But what I have found personally, and I'm curious about what you think on this, with my mother and father, I noticed that no matter how hard I tried to be an adult with them, they would not let me. They always kept me as the child. And, and they even said it. You're the child. You're always going to be my child. You're always going to be my child. No matter how hard I tried to say, but I'm an adult now.
I'm 63 years old.
I'm 64. You're my child. And I'll talk to you like my child, and I'll tell you what to do, and you listen. You listen to what I say. Okay, Pop, whatever you say. So, you get that dilemma, that dynamic that plays out with in-laws as well, because we all come to the table, I think, with that kind of dynamic of, okay, I want to respect you. I want to respect you not just because you're my mother-in-law, but because I'm honoring you as my elder in some regard. And so that's intrinsic too, honor our elders. And whether I'm 30 and you're 50, or I'm 60 and you're 80, it doesn't matter. You're still my elder. So we have this thing about respect as well. And that's all fine and dandy when our in-laws are acting like an adult and acting in a way that, makes sense and that we feel comfortable with.
Yeah, I think it's, when I think about honoring thy mother and thy father, I think it's such an important commandment. And I think maybe, Joe, you probably know more than I do, but part of the reason it may be there is because as kids, we're really not wired to do that. We're wired to go out into the world and learn and explore and rebel. And as parents, we're wired to love no matter what. Now, not all of us do that. I mean, sometimes there's real breakdowns because of trauma or whatever other reason that we're incapable to come to the table to really love our children. But generally speaking, I think parents are wired to love and children are wired to grow and explore. And so that commandment becomes really important because it's kind of outside our nature a bit to love our parents, to honor them. And so, yeah, I think that's a real important dynamic, that we always have to be held accountable for that in some way.
So what happens when I am able to step into my adult self and I'm feeling grounded and mature, and I'm able to really, kind of talk to my in-laws or approach my new in-laws from that adult self, but they're not. Okay, they're kind of sitting in this role of their beliefs and their values and their limitations and their cultural baggage about how I'm supposed to show up. And they're putting that on me. And so they're pushing all my buttons, but I'm trying to stay centered.
But that's great. I mean, that's great if you can stay focused. But we do, I think it's a little bit easier with in-laws than your own parents, because to your point, with our own parents, we have these patterns that go back so many years. We get a new set of parents, essentially, right? It's a different challenge, right? But it's not the same ingrained pattern.
No.
So they may push my buttons, but I probably have some more resource because it's a new relationship and it doesn't have the history. So that would be my guess on it. But if you have in-laws pushing your buttons, it really requires us as adults, when we're in our adult, to set boundaries.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
I think
we have a few questions.
I think this is okay. You have some questions?
Yeah, we have a few questions, and I don't know. I didn't really look at them too well, but these were questions that came in from. They were emailed to us. So let's cover these, and then we'll get to the others if we have time.
Sure.
Okay, so are we doing okay there?
Yes, and once the audio is a little bit low. So just
anybody, please chime in again. In-law issues, think of your own.
Okay, we'll speak up a little bit and give us feedback on the audio. Okay, here's one. It's my wife is angry with her mom. I see it wears on her and I want to help, but I don't know how. I keep telling her to spend less time That's not possible.
My wife is angry at her mom.
My wife is angry at her mom and it wears on
That's why it's
her.
on her.
And this person, this listener said he wants to help, but he doesn't know how. She's getting worn down by her mom.
Right,
And he says, I keep telling her to spend less time, but that's not possible.
right. Well, I'm anxious to hear what you have to say about this. From my quick standpoint, my vantage point, I would say that, like everything we've been saying, that it's not about solving the problem. You know, it sounds like the husband wants to fix it, you know, spend
Right.
less time with your
Right.
with your mother. I wouldn't go there. I think that's kind of missing the point,
Mhm.
which I feel is to hear the frustration, hear the hurt, hear the anger, hear whatever's going on with her,
Mhm.
and learn how to settle down, quiet your mind,
Mhm.
and listen to your partner and
Mhm.
allow them to really talk a little, as long as they need to, about what's going on and what's frustrating them. And then, of course, validating and empathizing, showing compassion towards your partner's pain and suffering, and making sure that they understand that you know how they feel.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. I think that's exactly the way I would suggest handling that.
Okay.
But I can tell you, because I've had clients in this situation, this is not an unfamiliar thing. I think what happens in these situations is that the husband gets really mad at the in-law because husbands want a happy home.
Sure.
And the in-law is now threatening my happy home. And so I care so much about you, I need to like do away with that in-law, you know, because she's making my wife unhappy. So energetically, when I start building up anger toward the in-law because she's treating my wife a certain way, it doesn't help the situation. It just adds fuel to the fire. So I think one of the other things that I would suggest is trying to let go of anger and recognize that your mother-in-law is challenged. She's got her own challenges. And that's why there's this contentious relationship between mother and daughter.
Mhm.
And to have energetically a little bit more compassion toward her,
Mhm.
because your anger toward her is not going to help the relationship, and it's not going to help you
Mhm.
try to help your wife. So
And we know that mother-daughter relationships tend to be contentious anyway.
that's true.
You know, it's pretty,
Yeah.
it's, you know, there's so many books and articles written about the difficulties that daughters have with their moms.
Right.
So we really do want to be able to, you know, have that compassion and understand that dynamic.
Yeah. Speak up.
Speak up.
Speak up.
Next question.
Okay, next question. Okay, so I hope that helped. Okay, here's one. We just got engaged and already my in-laws are making all the decisions. It's my wedding, and because they are paying for it, I feel like I don't have a voice in my own wedding. My husband feels like he's in the middle.
Mm.
What would you say about that one?
It's a common boundary issue with a lot of couples. And, you know, a lot of times parents will overstep their boundaries and want to make decisions.
Mhm.
In this particular case, it's over what?
Paying for the wedding.
Paying for the wedding. You know, and there's always strings attached, right? So, you know, there's no free ride. Your parents pay for the wedding. They expect a certain amount back. Oftentimes, it's who they're going to invite, how many they're going to invite. So, you know, these are difficult battles to have, you know, and you want to be able to set boundaries, firm boundaries with your partner ahead of time. So, you know, these are conversations that have to be taken offline, away from your parents, just the two of you, where you are able to work out what the two of you are willing to do and not willing to do. And sometimes we just have to make that boundary really clear for our parents, you know, but we also have to be flexible, right? I mean, they are paying for the wedding.
Yeah, I think this is a tough one. And again, I've seen this one because it's the beginning of the relationship,
Mhm.
right? So here it is. This is a guy, right? So this is this man's relationship with his mom, probably,
Okay.
right?
Right.
Very strong, good relationship with the parents. And in walks my new wife. And so I think when that happens, it's very easy for the parents to see this as a little bit of a competition. I've had my son my whole life. We've had this relationship, and who the hell are you?
Mm.
And so it's like this whole new dynamic is being created. And I've seen it several times with men and their mothers, not to stereotype, but when a strong relationship is there, it's really hard sometimes for the mom to back down a little bit and find her balance, find her way, find her center. And so because the wedding, you have a stake in it, and moms, like, weddings mean a lot to them. There's a lot on the table for that. And so what I would suggest is to recognize that everybody's trying to find their footing in this. Everybody's trying to find their place. And if I approach that with fear, with resentment, with anger, you're, to say the least, you're getting off to a wrong start. But it does create the tension and the resistance in the relationship. So I would say be as generous as possible and recognize that your mother-in-law is struggling with this as much as you are. I would say just be more generous, more loving, and pick your battles, because it's a wedding and there's certain things that are going to be really, really important to you, but probably not every detail.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, you're going to get triggered by your in-laws. It's going to be hard at times to kind of take the high road. And, you can think of 1,000 different issues that will come up. So how do you take the high road? It's really, really challenging. And that's why, in terms of mindfulness, and we're all about mindfulness, it doesn't happen at that moment. You need to be practicing mindfulness practice so that when the shit hits the fan and that kind of stuff happens and your mother-in-law is in your face, you're already practiced, you're prepared, you're mindful, you know how to ground yourself, you know how to take a breath, you know how to take some space.
Right.
So you need to have that practice in your back pocket, because these things are going to happen. You are going to get triggered, and you have a choice. You can take the high road, or you can just kind of break down, melt down, and deal with the consequences.
And I would say the other thing is set an intention. And my intention is, I want a really good relationship with my in-laws. It's a new one, it's forming, and I want a good relationship with my husband. I want us to be really happy as a family.
Yeah.
There may be breakdowns, but that's my intention.
Yeah.
And I feel like my intention guide my behaviors, then it's gonna go in the right direction usually. Sarah?
We've got a live question here.
A live one.
Alive. How do you deal with your partner's unwillingness to address a dysfunctional family situation? My partner and I experience a lot of tension because I feel that he avoids important conversations with his family members that are worthy of braving attention that they may create. It makes me feel frustrated and creates distance between us.
I love that question. Thank you. That's a great, great question. I don't know if everybody heard it. I hope everybody heard it.
You want to repeat it?
Yeah, you want to repeat it one more time?
Yeah, the first
Sarah?
part is how do you deal with your partner's unwillingness to address a dysfunctional family situation?
Yeah. So the question is, how do you deal with your partner who's unwilling to address a dysfunctional family situation? And it's general. I don't know if that person's willing to come on and talk to us about it. No. Okay. So so that's a tough one. Do you have any thoughts on it?
I have a couple of thoughts on it. First of all, it's so hard sometimes to acknowledge that our partner has their own challenges with their parents, that they themselves are just so inept at managing before you ever came on board. That just being able to have a relationship with a parent is so hard sometimes. And we live in that water, that culture that we were raised in from the time we were born with these dysfunctional parents. And that's all we know. And we've adapted, we've adjusted to that. So I had a client where the father was Russian, right off the boat. And he was a dictator. He was a dictator. He practically made his son kiss his feet. It wasn't that bad, but it was pretty hard. You never talk back to me. You only do what I say. And the wife came into the picture and saw all this behavior. And she said, you can't accept that. You need to get on it, talk back to him, explain. He can't talk to you that way. But he had adjusted to this behavior his whole life. And he thought, and he believed, and probably correctly, that if he confronted his father, he would lose the relationship with his father completely. And so he knew that. And he wanted to choose to at least have a relationship with him, even though he knew darn well it was dysfunctional. And he knew his father was completely out of it.
So you're saying the patterns are really set up, and they're set up based on some real grounded assessments about what's going on.
Yeah.
So when somebody comes in and sees the dysfunction and gets frustrated because nothing's changing, it's because there's so much behind it. It's so deep. Right.
It's entrenched.
It's entrenched. And that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
It makes a lot of sense that somebody come in can see it so clearly.
So clearly.
Right. Right. But I guess so when you see it so clearly, it's important to understand that what you're seeing is an embedded dynamic.
Right.
Right. So what do you do? So what would your advice be? I see this embedded dynamic. I see so clearly that it needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And it's not changing.
Well, interesting, if I could just say what happened with this couple. The wife chose, and I understood her position, not to have anything to do with the in-laws, because it went over to her as well. He started talking to her the same way. And he was okay. The husband was okay with that. He understood that. He continued to have a relationship with his father, and she decided to back out. And so, there's different ways of managing it. I think talking to your husband about it. Listen, if you can enlighten your partner and they can hear your concern and are willing to actually make some changes that would be good for them. Like I needed to talk up to my dad at one point.
Right.
And it was hard. I was scared. And I did it. And it was probably one of the best moves I ever made. So sometimes you can have a partner can be your backbone and can help you.
Yeah. So I think that, if you want somebody to change, you're going to get there more easily or more successfully if you're not so scary. I think what happens is that when we're sitting on a really valid point and we want somebody to change, is that we become very direct.
Yeah.
You need to, you should, this is ridiculous. And that becomes a scary place to change from, right? And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to push against you. I can't do that. I can't do that. Look at this behavior. It's so embedded. Look what you're asking me to do. So I think that if you see behavior that you think should change, you may want to look at how you're presenting it and be less scary for the person. Just small little loving steps. And I saw things with your dad, and I didn't tell you in the beginning, you should. I waited a few days. And then I came at you strong, but you accepted it. I did.
Because I already recognized it.
Right. But it doesn't always happen that way. Was there a second part
Thank you.
to that question?
Great question.
Okay. Awesome. Oh, I got questions.
Do you want to talk a little bit about boundaries?
Well, let me just skip through these because I
All right.
just, let's see. So we did those two. Okay, I married a man from a very different culture, and his relationship with his mom, this is what you're talking about. His relationship with his mom is very close. I grew up in a very different environment. I want to support him, but I see him getting exhausted taking care of all her needs, and I feel she is more important than me. So this is somebody who, we see this a lot, right? These different culture things.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And how we interact with our parents are very, very different. And it sounds like this is the same thing. So this sounds like a woman who married a man. His relationship with his mom is very close. And she wants to support him, but she sees him getting exhausted. So he's doing a lot. And she's probably more independent, I'm guessing.
Yeah. This isn't unlike the last example,
right,
where, this partner has some possible influence to help the son set some boundaries with his mom. It's difficult. It's such a primary powerful relationship, the mother-son relationship.
Yeah.
And to come in and try to break it up too
Well, you
quickly,
don't want to break it up.
well, too strongly, to kind of give space so that
Right.
that you're the main. Well, in my opinion, and I was always taught this, is that your wife, once you get married, your wife is number one. Your mother is number two now. So, we do want to have that paradigm shift where the focus is here, not here. But of course, there's got to be some balance. So, having that conversation with your partner is important. And if you can get your partner to talk to his mother about it. I had to do this with my sister and Debbie. It was a little bit different. It wasn't an in-law, but my sister, hope she's not on. Well, maybe it's okay if she's on. Are you on, Andrea? My sister was jealous of the time that I was putting in with Debbie because she lost that from her. And
Wait, what happened?
She was upset, and she was upset at Debbie. And I didn't do anything. I was just, doing what I'm supposed to do, married to my wife. And here's my sister angry at me and angry at Debbie because I'm spending more time with her now. What happened? So I had to talk. We talked about it, and we had a conversation. I explained that, I still love you. I love you very, very much, but I'm going to be spending my time with my wife. And every now and then we get her involved.
Right. But it's gotten better over time. I think that, she took it to heart, and over time it's balanced out.
Yeah,
don't you think?
I think it has.
Like sometimes.
Yeah, it's much better.
Yeah.
It's much better.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely having conversations.
So yeah, this is going to happen with your mother-in-law for sure. We got another question.
Okay.
Sarah's going to read.
My partner and I aren't married, but we're heading there. His relationship with his parents makes me uncomfortable. They expect to control most aspects of his life. I felt repeatedly disrespected by their behavior toward not just me, but him too. But he seems to have accepted that's the way they treat him. I'm not sure what approach is most effective because I get frustrated by his lack of agency.
Yeah, that's a great example of what we were talking about before, that this behavior is embedded. And so what I would do is I would become really, really curious about his relationship with his parents, and not in a frustrated, angry way, but in a curious and compassionate way. Tell me more about that. I'm really curious. When I see your parents do that and then you do that, I'm just kind of curious what goes on. How do you feel about that? And just present yourself in a less, again, scary way, because otherwise he's going to clam up and he's going to get frustrated and he's not going to know what to do. And, about him not having enough agency, it's an embedded pattern. And I know it can be very difficult to look at it, and then it becomes a respect thing, right? And then that goes down, hill really fast. But I would say just look at your guy with a ton of compassion and understanding and curiosity, and he'll definitely start to open up. But you can have a lot of influence in that way.
Nobody wants to be talked to disrespectfully, and even if he's learned to accept that, and I think you have such influence. You have positive influence, but as Debbie said, you need to do it in a positive, loving way. And he can change. Your husband can get stronger, can get a backbone. It would be good for him.
Well, this might be a good time to talk about boundaries.
Okay, we have another question.
Okay, we'll do that after.
This is a good question. It ties in. How can we cultivate practices that help us be more compassionate towards our in-laws? Sometimes the tough situations feel really raw because they impact the person that I love the most.
Right, because I care about you so much. And to see somebody treating you that way, it harms me, right? And so the question's a great one. And how can I present with more compassion to the one that's harming the one I love? I love that question because in and of itself, it has so much compassion in it. The desire to be more compassionate to the one that's hurting the one I love. I mean, what a beautiful question is that? Yeah. And so you're starting at a really good place. Because embedded in that question is a desire to be more compassionate, a desire to be more understanding, a desire to be more loving. How I would do that is I would look for loving aspects. I would look for things that they're doing that are loving. And when I would find them, I would expand them. I really appreciate the way, my in-laws, they call him every day. It shows me how much they really love him. Because my parents don't call, more than once a month. And so they're like, they're on top of the job, and I really appreciate it.
That's great.
So a lot of the things that really annoy you can be looked at in a more compassionate, loving way.
Find the positive.
Find the positive.
Yeah. So you're becoming a positivity watchdog. You're really looking for that one positive thing that they do, and that's what you're focusing on. The other thing I just want to say is this, that there's this concept in psychology called separation or individuation. And this is the idea that you are an individual, they are an individual. They have a long life where they've cultivated their own values, their own beliefs, their own assumptions. They have their own history. They have their own culture. You are not going to change them, okay? But you have choices, how you conduct yourself. And so if you're strong and you feel in your power and you're empowered, then you don't need to default to they're right, I'm right, they're wrong type of mentality, because that's all in judgment, and that's sort of a lower vibration. If you're strong and you can sit and look, I've got my own values, I've got my own beliefs, I've got my own assumptions, and that's where I stand. I disagree with the way they behave, but I understand. They didn't get this way for no reason. They had their own parents, they had their own upbringing, they had their own trauma, they had their own all of that. So we just want to be able to sort of acknowledge that in them and namaste them, It's like the divine in me bows to the divine in you.
I think the other thing that I would say is, when you feel like you're getting triggered with them, is just to let it flow through your body. So many times if somebody annoys me and I'm really having a hard time seeing anything positive, it's because they've annoyed me once before, or twice, or 3 times, or 10 times, or 20, and that emotion just gets stuck. And so it's so important when life presents us with annoyance or frustration, and it lands in our body, that we just psychologically, with our imagination, we let it flow through us
and
not get stuck.
That's a good technique, but where it gets stuck is the story, right?
Well, the story fuels it,
Right.
right? The story fuels the emotion.
Yeah.
It creates the emotion. So I have a story, and it creates an emotion of frustration or anger or resentment, whatever it is, and that emotion just lives in my body. So let's say I get really resentful with whatever's going on with my in-law. I'm just really resentful. But it's not good to be resentful, so I'm just going to stuff it, and I'm going to pretend that I'm going to try and be positive, and I'm just going to pretend like I'm not upset for the sake of my wife. But what happens in that situation is that the resentment just stays. When I talk to clients and I say, okay, so you're feeling really resentful, where's the resentment in your body? They think a second, they say, okay, it's here, and it goes a little bit around here, and I've got a little bit in my hands. When you clench your hands, it's anger, right? Because sometimes it's my hands, and it's a little bit right over here. People know exactly where negative emotion lands in their body because it's there. It's a real thing. So to be more compassionate, let the negative flow through you. It gets stuck.
Good point.
Okay, how are we doing on time?
7:37.
So
8 minutes left.
8 minutes. Okay, let me see if I've gotten through this. Oh, do you want to do,
Do you have a question? Go ahead.
we have just one more.
Maybe they'll tie in.
We just have one more. We have 2 more. Okay, here's real quick. My in-laws own the house we live in. And while I'm very appreciative of the generosity, I also struggle because they are over all the time. And I feel like I can't say anything because they own the house. That's a good one.
No, that's a very good one. It's definitely a boundary issue, right? So setting boundaries, maybe this is a good segue into that.
Yeah, so I always talk about, boundaries are really, really important. And a lot of times people go to therapy and then all of a sudden they get really what seems like mean. Like, you can't come over to the house because it's not good for my son and blah, 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 blah. And it's because they went to therapy and they learned the importance of setting boundaries. And setting boundaries is super important to take care of yourself. This is the problem, is they have to be loving boundaries. If we just set boundaries, they come across as mean and defensive, and they're only going to activate the behavior that you're trying to protect yourself from. So, boundaries are all about getting clear about what it is that you need and want. What are your limitations? What are your desires? What is it you're trying to create? A loving boundary looks at what type of a relationship do you want with the other person? What do you appreciate about the other person? What do you care about? And it's the intersection. It's like, here's me and here's the other person. If I just set a boundary, it's all about me. The other person's like, okay, screw you, right? But if I set a loving boundary, here's me and here's you, and there's a lot about you that I really, really care about. And I want us to identify, like, there's things that we share in common that are important to both of us. That's part of you, right? And when that intersection comes together, it's a beautiful thing.
So let's use this as an example.
So
here's a house, right? My parents
here's a
own
house, parents own
and
it.
in-laws own it.
Right.
They think they can come over anytime. So the issue they
Exactly.
want to address is their influence and interference, or setting trying to influence the decision of when they can come over and when they can't. So how would you set a loving boundary?
I'm going to do both because I think it's important to see how they're different. So a boundary would be, we've decided that we really need more alone time. And so I know it's important to you to come over, but we're going to say no to Monday through Friday, and you can see the kids on Saturday and Sunday. That would be a regular boundary, okay? It's all about me and about what we need, and I want to make sure that you are really clear about that because I don't want you to cross the boundary. And that's how most of us set boundaries when we're about to set them. We have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to do this really quick. So a loving boundary would be, I love that you love being here because you are such amazing grandparents, and your generosity with this home like touches my heart in no way that it's been touched before, and I value the time we spend together. Here's the thing, that Schmendrick and I, we really feel like we're losing a bit of each other. We feel like we need time with just the family.
And maybe a long time. I need my own time.
We need
time
time
together,
just,
and I need time by myself here.
Yeah, we need time, just the family with nobody else, just the immediate family. We feel like we don't have enough. And I know that both of us love the kids and both of us care about that. But I'm wondering if there's a way that we can create more family time for the sake of the kids and the sake of our marriage, and have you here, because that's super important to us.
Are you trying to tell me I can't come anymore?
No, not at all.
That's what it sounds like.
I want you here a lot, but maybe just not as much, so that we can create this family time.
I can go from, I know I've been coming around 7 days a week. I'll cut it back to 6.
To 6? So 6 would give us 1 day. But I was thinking, what I think would really support our marriage, which I know you care about, and the kids, which I know you love, we're on the same page there, is I was thinking maybe 4 days a week. You think we can try that? And if it doesn't work, we can revisit it. But I think 3 days would give us a chance to really kind of blend a little bit as a family.
Well, I can still come over whenever I want, though, right?
Okay. So
because she was saying that they come over whenever they want.
Right. Okay. Oh, yeah. So, so what we would, well.
No.
No. Yeah.
No, that's a big no.
Yeah.
But that's a hard no with love. How do you do that with love?
So you want to come over whenever you want?
Yeah.
Well, let's do 4 days a week. And in those 4 days, you can come over whenever you want. How's that?
No, that's not what the question was. The question is, I don't want you coming over whenever you want.
No, but within those 4 days, you can come over whenever you want. Those are your days. Have at it.
Wow.
So basically what we're trying to do is find a way that, you can get them to agree, because you both care about the same things. In this case, about the marriage and about the kids and about the whole family.
she's leveraging what she already knows about them, right? She knows they care about the kids. She knows she cares about the family. She knows she cares about the two of you.
Right.
So she's taking that information and leveraging it to get what she needs, which is great.
And the beauty about loving boundaries is that instead of alienating the relationship or separating it out and making the other person feel bad, you can actually use it to reinforce it. Like, you guys are amazing grandparents. I feel so blessed. I really do. And I like, who gets that? Who gets grandparents that want to be here all the time? My friends' grandparents are out traveling and they never want to spend time. I just feel so grateful for you guys. So it's an opportunity to reinforce what you love about them, and they'll be so filled up that chances are they'll be cooperative. So that's a loving boundary, and that's why they're so powerful. How much time do we
the
have?
other thing, I'll say one last thing about that is, we were talking about it earlier, is being able to say no thank you to people. You know, they're coming over, they're giving you certain things, they're helping you in certain ways, but they're overstepping their boundaries, even with financial contributions. Sometimes it's just best to say no thank you.
And the reason that's so important is because it's better to get a no thank you than, this is what is really bad. It's a yes, but it's really a no. I say yes to you, but energetically I'm saying no. And nobody, that's a disrespectful thing. Move.
Yeah, true.
It doesn't support anything.
Yeah.
So anyhow, we're out of time, right, Sarah? But we want to thank you guys for joining us in this interesting conversation, and it's an interesting one because it presents some unique challenges.
Yeah.
And I feel like we just kind of skimmed the surface. And many of us, like, you know, in-laws aren't really an issue for us. Maybe not for all of you, but I think the dynamics that are at play in an in-law situation are very similar to any relationship.
Yeah. Next week, we're going to be conquering a new topic, which we think is so important, and that's repairing a relationship after a conflict. We're going to talk specifically about repairs, how to make them, and how to be effective so that after an argument, you can get back to equilibrium with each other. So we're excited about that.
That's a great one because nobody even thinks of the concept of repair.
Yeah.
When clients come in, it's like, repair?
It's really cool when you get a client who comes into the office and says, I did a really good repair.
Yeah. They're good students. Anyhow, thanks, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. Stay safe, and the best to everybody.
Yes.
It's challenging times.
Yes, blessings to everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you two for doing this. I really enjoy these.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for always joining in. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. You guys take care. I'm seeing you tomorrow, Craig.
Okay, see you then.
Bye.